Hello everybody, it's Jeff from Close to Home in Glastonbury here with the September block of the month. This one's called Sea Urchin. We are entering the autumn here, getting some crisper weather, and the leaves will be changing soon, and I hope everybody had a wonderful summer. So let's start with our block of the month. These are the pieces that you're going to cut off for your block. From the focus fabric, you're going to cut one 4.5 inch by 4.5 inch square and four 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch squares. From accent color number 1, that's my teal, you're going to cut two 3 inch by 3 inch squares and then four 4.5 inch by 2.5 inch rectangles. Then from accent color number 2, that's my white with the blue shells, you're going to cut two 3 inch by 3 inch squares and eight 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch squares. And then from the background, you're going to cut eight 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch squares and four 4.5 inch by 2.5 inch rectangles. We're going to take all of the accent number 2 squares, so that's the two 3 inch and the eight 2.5 inch squares, and you're going to mark a line from corner to corner on the back of the fabric. Now we're going to make a few half square triangles. So you're going to take your 3 inch accent number 2 squares that you just marked, and you're going to pair those with the 3 inch accent number 1 squares. And you're going to stitch a 1/4 inch on each side of your marked line, cut on that marked line, then press the seams toward accent number 1 fabric, or open if you prefer, and then you're going to trim that down to 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches, and when you're done you will end up with 4 of these half square triangle units. Now we're going to make some flying geese units. So for this one you're going to take your 4.5 inch by 2.5 inch accent number 1 rectangle, take one of those, and you're going to place a 2.5 inch accent number 2 square on one of the corners, just like shown, and you're going to sew on the marked line, not a 1/4 inch away, you're sewing on the marked line, trim to a 1/4 inch seam, press toward the smaller accent number 2 triangle, or open if you prefer, and then on the other side we're going to place another accent number 2 square, just as shown. Do the same thing, so on the marked line, trim that 1/4 inch seam and press, and you're going to repeat until you make 4 of these flying geese units. Now take one of those flying geese units you just made, and you're going to pair that with a 4.5 inch by 2.5 inch background rectangle, just as shown. Sew those together and press toward the background color, or open if you prefer, and then repeat to make 4 of these units. You will also take a 2.5 inch focus fabric square, 2 of the 2.5 inch background squares, and the half square triangle unit you made, and arrange it just like shown on the screen. You're going to sew the rows together and then sew the top to the bottom. You can iron toward the background, that's how I did it on all these, or open if you prefer, and repeat to make 4 of these units. Then we just have to put everything together. So you're going to, in the corners, have the units with the half square triangles. Notice those half square triangles are kind of pointing toward the center, arranged just like that. The side units between those corners are the flying geese units that we made. And then that middle center square is the 4.5 inch focus fabric square. And you're going to sew those rows together. Then you can sew the top to the bottom, and here we have our finished block, Sea Urchin. I hope everybody is having a great autumn, and I will see you again for the next block on Halloween. Thank you.